everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I have already posted a video, but I just wanted to get on and do another video because today is ANZAC Day. So ANZAC Day is a day where we remember those who went off to war to fight for our country. And not only is it a day to remember, but it also helps the younger generations that are starting to come through to realize what they have today is because of these people who went to war. So the really tragic thing about this war is that it wasn't like today where you sign up and then you go through all this testing and you're either in the military or you're not. It was basically they just picked any random people, and if your name got called, you just had to go. There was no declining. If you did decline, you had to have a really good reason. So basically, I want to share a story with you guys today. So my great-grandfather, he did go to World War II. So his name got called and he came up and he said, well, I don't want to go. I don't want to shoot another man. It's like, it says in the Bible, thou shalt not kill. So he did not want to kill anyone. So they said, okay, then you can go as an ambulance person. So my great-grandfather, he didn't share much with us about what he experienced at war. As you can imagine, it would have been pretty traumatizing. So a lot of people who did go to war, they haven't really shared much with their families, but he did share a few experiences with us. Like, I remember sitting down and chatting with them one day when they were still alive. And you know, he was saying about how he would be treating the wounded men, and like they didn't have very much medical wise back then. They didn't have everything that they have today to treat the wounded people. So basically back in 2010, the newspaper did a write-up about my grandfather going off to war. So I will include that at the end of this video, and I might just quickly read through it just in case there is anybody who watches my videos that is visually impaired. So just before I show you guys that news article, I just want to tell you guys a little story about my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather. So everybody who went off to war, they were quite young. So my great-grandparents, they were not married. They were just, as they said in their own words, they were courting, although we would say dating or whatever today. So while my great-grandfather was away at war, he wasn't really coping with it, so he had to be brought back to Australia. But that was really hard because back then, if you're a man, to even admit that you're not doing okay was a big no-no. Thankfully today though, we encourage men to talk about their feelings just like a woman would. We encourage everyone to talk about their feelings, and you know, there's no shame in talking about your feelings. But back then, they really made men feel like that if they did talk about how they were feeling, or if they did admit that they were feeling sad or depressed, they made the men feel so low. And I can't even begin to imagine what it would have been like living back then as a man. I mean, I know it wasn't completely good for the women either, because even women having mental health was frowned upon. Mental health was just frowned upon altogether. Like, the whole outlook on it was, oh, just get over it. You know, it was like, oh, you're feeling sad, just get over it. Whereas we know today that mental health is so not just get over it. You need like counseling, or in some cases antidepressants is needed. So basically, when my great-grandfather got back to Australia, he was still with my great-grandma, and not long after that they decided to get married. They got married and had a few kids, and yeah, then their kids had kids, and their kids had kids, and here I am. So that is my story about my great-grandfather, and I really do look up to those who not only went to war and actually had to hold a gun, but I also do look up to those who went to war as a service person in the ambulance. Like, it would have been traumatizing for both people really, even if you were an ambulance person. Even though you weren't shooting people, you were still seeing the injuries of the people who had been shot. You were still dealing with all that. Like, while people shooting, they were seeing their friends and they were seeing people getting killed. There were people who were back dealing with the wounded, and they would have seen some horrific things. And no doubt the people who were in the medical field would have seen a lot of people die right before their eyes, a lot of people who they probably weren't able to save. Again, as I said before, my great-grandfather did used to say they didn't have all the medical equipment that we do have today. So it would have been really challenging for people on both sides. I just think it's really good that we have this day where we can remember those who did go and fight for our country, even though it is so tragic that it even had to happen. Like, a lot of us just want world peace. We don't want war. We want love. That is the story of my great-grandfather. And now I'm going to show you guys the news article. So this news article was written back in 2010, and at this point both my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother were both still alive. I was so lucky to get the privilege to meet my great-grandparents on this side of the family. All my other great-grandparents, there was only one other great-grandparent that I met, but I was very privileged to meet my great-grandfather who went off to war, and my great-grandmother. And I gotta tell you guys, they were the cutest couple ever. I actually remember sitting down with my great-grandmother one day when I was up visiting them, because we would go on family holidays and we would visit them. And I was sitting with my great-grandmother and we were talking about the age gap that was in between them, because as many of you might know, there is 11 years between my husband and I. So even though I didn't know my husband at the time and I didn't know there was going to be a huge age gap in between us, she was just talking about the age gap between them. And she was just saying how she felt sorry for him because he was older than her by like 9 years or something, and she was elderly too, so like she couldn't help him out as much as she wished she could. But it was so cute, guys. She said the sweetest thing to me. She's like, oh, he was still so good looking way back in the day, and even today I think he's the best looking man on earth. I'm like, that is so cute. Guys, the feels. Like, honestly, that was like true love. To hear her say that, like, oh, he's still the best looking guy I know. Like, guys, that is true love, and it was just so beautiful to hear her say that. So now I'm going to stop blubbering and I'm going to get on to this news article. So here it is. The title for this news article said Freedom's High Cost. And it just says at the beginning here that he was a 42nd Battalion. His service was in the Second World War from 1941 to 1943, and it was in Papua New Guinea. So at the time of this interview, he was 95 years old, and he was Mackay's longest living ANZAC. So then it goes on to say that his wife Doreen, who is my great-grandmother, said that she couldn't be prouder of her heroic husband. Then the article goes on to say that the couple courted during Mr. Lorne's military service in Papua New Guinea during the Second World War. We sent letters back and forward. There were no phone calls, recalls Mrs. Lorne. And I do actually remember my great-grandmother actually telling me that they did send letters back and forward, and she just said how hard it was not being able to make a phone call like we can in today's day and age. So now back to the news article. Mr. Lorne explained how the atrocities of the war were unimaginable to those who weren't on the battlefront. A high price was paid, many people lost their lives, he said. The bravery and fortitude of the men and women who served for our country is something that I'm proud of. Mrs. Lorne placed a comforting hand on the shoulder of her husband, who was momentarily overwhelmed with the emotional memories that ANZAC Day brings back to him. It's so important that younger generations recognise and respect the sacrifice that our servicemen and women made toward the country that we live in today, he said. Our diggers are so proud of the ANZAC tradition. Our own children and their families support them by attending the parade each year and paying their respects. Mr. and Mrs. Lorne have been married for 67 years. They have 7 children, 26 grandchildren, and 55 great-grandchildren. So that is the end of the newspaper article. Obviously, as I said before, this newspaper article was written back in 2010, so there have been some added grandchildren since then, but I am one of the 55 great-grandchildren, although now it's many more. So now there are the photos and their captions, which I will also read to you. So there are two photos here, so this is the caption for the first photo. Basically, it just says the same thing as it says at the beginning of the article. So it just says that he is 95 years old and is Mackay's longest living digger. Although if he was still alive today, he would be over 100 years old now. Then it says he is pictured with a photograph of himself as a dashing young soldier. So the caption for the second photo is basically what was already mentioned in the article also. It just says that they are holding a photograph of some of their family. The couple have 7 children, 26 grandchildren, and 55 great-grandchildren who are proud and grateful of his service during World War II that has given them a life in a free and democratic country. So that is the article that was published back in 2010. So I hope you guys enjoyed reading and listening. So again, thank you so much for watching this video, and just before I go, I just want to express how grateful I am for the people who did go off and risk their lives so that we could have this country that we live in today. So thank you so much for that, and we will always remember you. So with that being said, lest we forget, and I will see you in the next video. So bye till then. Over to you, Eva.
Give me thumbs up. That guy.